Welcome to Beyond Conversations. Today's episode is very exciting. It has to do with a hot topic that has been brewing for years or decades, even, but is now uh, on the minds of a much more numerous group of people, really orders of magnitude potentially more than before, thanks to recent developments. And it is the topic of artificial intelligence. My name is David Orban, and our guest today is Ben Goertzel. Ben is a cognitive scientist, artificial intelligence researcher. He's the CEO and founder of SingularityNET, a project that aims to democratize access to artificial intelligence. And he actually helped popularize the term artificial general intelligence, which refers to the goal of creating machines that can perform any intellectual task that humans can. Welcome, Ben, to Beyond Conversations.
Hey, David, thank you. It's a pleasure to go over these topics with you for what is not the first time, right? You and I have been digging into these issues. Presumably since way before we met each other. I've been thinking about these things since the early 1970s, but we must have been talking among ourselves about this for 15, 20 years or something, quite a long time, right? And
That's
indeed,
correct. I am proud to be your friend. And full disclosure, I'm also the chairman of the SingularityNet supervisory board. We will have an event in just a couple of days, talking about the next phase of the SingularityNet decentralization. And that will be also an interesting opportunity to talk about governance. That is the reason why we are not going to maybe touch that as much today. But why don't you highlight maybe some aspects and recent developments of the SingularityNet ecosystem, which is developing so rapidly and so broadly that I'm sure just mentioning a few of the most recent components would be helpful.
yeah. So I've been thinking about the singularity and the future and AGI before the terms singularity or AGI became current, right? And I've been working on trying to build thinking machines or build toward the building of thinking machines actively since the mid 1990s. Now, as soon as the internet came about in the mid 90s and then the dot-com boom in the late 90s, it was clear to me, in one way or another, the birth of the singularity and AGI and all this was likely to be distributed widely across a bunch of different machines rather than being in just one supercomputer sitting in some secret lab or in somebody's basement. I mean, not that this physically centralized approach was impossible, but it just didn't seem to be the way things were going, right? Like, I mean, I'd known Danny Hillis, who was building the connection machine, this massively parallel AI supercomputer, and it was brilliant and fascinating. But the tech world was obviously evolving in a different direction, both in the physical infrastructure being distributed and the emergence of collaborative networks of people in far-flung places working together to bring things into being. So actually, I started thinking in 99, 2000 about how do you use strong encryption and distributed processing, and how do you bring these together to create distributed, decentralized AI networks without a single owner or controller, almost some emergent aspect to the intelligence in the network. I ran into serious practical obstacles at that time. I mean, I was working with Java 1.1. It was just really, really slow. Machines didn't have the RAM they do now. Network speeds weren't what they are now. And I didn't hit upon the idea of starting with decentralized money instead of decentralized AI. If I had, I would have been Satoshi, which unfortunately I'm not. And my AI projects would be tremendously better funded, although we're not doing incredibly badly. But it was clear then, as soon as the internet came about, it was really clear you needed decentralized control. And then if you fast forward to 2015, I saw Ethereum came out, and you had the notion of a smart contract, which was clear to me immediately was neither smart nor a contract. It's really sort of a persistent script, sort of involved in a decentralized validation and consensus mechanism. And I hated the solidity language from the get-go, just as a computer scientist and from a programming language perspective. But it was clearly the beginning of something incredible, right? Like you were able to write these relatively simple, albeit ugly looking scripts that were sort of nodes in this global world computer, which it would seem by putting the right thing in those scripts, you could then make them nodes in a global brain, right? And this was super exciting. This led in 2017 to me founding SingularityNET, which was basically an attempt to make a platform for allowing multiple AI agents to cooperate and collaborate in flexible ways. So from an AI view, the idea is somewhat like what pioneer Marvin Minsky called the society of mind. And I'm not actually quite as far in that direction as Minsky, but his thinking was inspirational here. Minsky was looking at a human mind, or any mind in his view, as a society of smaller agents, each carrying out particular fragmentarily intelligent functions, and then all cooperating together to achieve sort of emergent dynamics of intelligence. Now, Minsky didn't like nonlinear dynamics and complexity and chaos, which perplexed me because there's a strong emergence aspect to the multi-agent systems that he himself was putting forward. He was a complex and fascinating character who unfortunately isn't with us anymore. Though I'd love to bring him back if post-singularity technology allows. But anyway, with SingularityNet, we basically created a decentralized blockchain-based platform for multi-agent systems. Anyone in the world can put an agent online. They can have that agent announced by the SingularityNet protocol. Hey, I'm here, to all the other agents running the SNet protocol. Then they can pay other agents in the network for services. They can outsource work for them. They can cooperate together doing tasks. They can rate each other's reputations. And we rolled out a version of this platform a few years ago. It's still getting better and better. So, I mean, we're pretty close to rolling out what we're calling the AI DSL, domain-specific language for AIs, which is a special programming language for the AIs to describe their properties and capabilities and preferences to each other, which is a key ingredient to allow automated assembly of different agents into collectives. In building this, though, we realized there was a lot of other missing pieces. You need to get a whole decentralized tech stack, which leads to some of the other interesting things going on in SingularityNet ecosystem, right? Because SingularityNet, we have the core protocol and platform built by SingularityNet Foundation and an open source community. Then have a number of different entities which are part of the ecosystem that are building stuff using this platform, or building sort of foundational tools complementary to the core SingularityNet platform, forming part of sort of decentralized tool stack. And that gets into NewNet, which allows decentralization of processing power and tokenization of processing power in a flexible way suitable for AI. Then the OpenCog Hyperon toolkit, which is our probably main thrust in terms of how to actually build AGI on this decentralized platform. And you can build AGI in any way you want on SingularityNet platform. Hyperon is our particular sort of neural symbolic evolutionary approach, which we'll talk about more in a few minutes when we get into LLMs and stuff. And then there's hypercycle, which is a collaboration with Tufi Saliba and Dan Tolliver and folks from the Toda ecosystem. And hypercycle, like NuNet and hypercycle, both live in a way below SingularityNet in the tech stack, right? NuNet tokenizes the processing power itself. So you can contribute processing power for tokens and receive tokens for processing power. And that processing power can then run SingularityNet agents or other things. Hypercycle is a layer one blockchain customized for AI. And you can run SingularityNet on Ethereum. We're most of the way there to making able to run it on Cardano as an alternative. And Cardano we found more efficient and scalable than Ethereum for AI purposes. Hypercycle, customized blockchain just for AI, will let SingularityNet decentralized AI agents run in a much faster and more scalable way. And I mean, Hypercycle is designed to work very closely with Cardano in particular, but it's a different design. We get rid of the ledger. So that's probably more than we can go into in depth in this call. But if you look at Ethereum, Bitcoin, and so on, they're all based on this replicated ledger that stores all transactions that have ever happened in the blockchain, right? So in Hypercycle, we get rid of this ledger and store transactions sort of fractionated all throughout the network in a more localized way. And this lets you have a much more efficient blockchain underpinning for decentralized AI. So we've been working hard on all these aspects of a decentralized infrastructure, and now we're feeling a need to like move way faster even than we've been doing, because we see like the centralized tech behemoths. Well, I don't think they have the golden key to AGI. The centralized tech behemoths are certainly getting extremely interesting AI functionalities on their
That's
centralized
right.
tech stack, and they've got
So
shitloads of resources behind it.
thank you for that introduction to the SingularityNet ecosystem. And let's now, as you mentioned, jump over to LLMs, large language models. A lot of people like moving goalposts and always defining AI by the things it cannot do. When it couldn't play chess very well, people would say, "Oh, AI is playing chess," and then when it could beat every human, suddenly it wasn't chess anymore. Now it seems to be natural language processing and ChatGPT, which now everyone knows. I am sure everyone following this video stream is able to manage text in a manner that I would say many humans cannot do. It creates text that is competent in many different fields. Now, that was sufficiently surprising, including to experts, to generate a particular alarm, not about what it can do now, but what may be able to do in the near future. And there was this open letter formulated by the Future of Life Institute at MIT and signed by a bunch of people and not signed by another bunch of people. And by the way, we belong to those two different camps. I did sign the letter and you didn't. And I feel that these disagreements are very healthy, especially in a decentralized and distributed world. If we were in complete agreement and alignment about everything, then there would be no reason to experiment with different approaches, and we would just be in a single hierarchical centralized field. So the open letter has been interpreted and misinterpreted in many ways, but very simply it says, in my opinion, it says, let's give a little breathing space for everyone to understand what is going on, especially um, to those who are in charge at these large tech companies and the regulators who should be moving faster and should be looking at what these tech companies are doing. 6 months, which is the pause of the open letter, is not going to be sufficient for sure, but at least it raised the conversation about this need. So, two questions to you. One, what um, makes you feel that this is not necessary or not useful? And two, what are the things, in your opinion, that are missing from the large language models that would require the kind of careful steps that the open letter advocates?
So I think as Singularity approaches, and I think it is approaching, I still see Ray Kurzweil's prediction of human level AI in 2029 as a reasonable stab. I mean, I think we may get there a few years in advance of that. I'm pushing for that. It may take a few years longer, but I don't think it's going to be many decades longer. I mean, if it turns out somehow human level intelligence requires, advanced quantum computing or quantum gravity supercomputing, maybe that could make it take a few decades longer. I give that a not zero, but very low percentage chance based on everything we know about the brain and everything we can do with computers now. So if that's true, that the singularity is coming in 5 to 10 years, 3 to 10 years, whatever, at least human level AI coming then, which will certainly accelerate the next stages of progress towards superhuman AI. There's going to be a lot of crazy things going down, a lot more impressive and a lot more disturbing to some people than ChatGPT, which in the end is a rather banal and only half useful chatbot, although very, very, very impressive in many ways compared to what came before, right? And I think in dealing with these sorts of unprecedented, crazy seeming situations, some basic principled thinking is helpful. Otherwise, when we just swung around like crazy by the wild, weird things that are happening. And so Max Moore, who we both know, who's been one of the leading philosophers of transhumanism, articulated some time ago what he called the proactionary principle, which was intended as a contrast to the precautionary principle that others had talked about. And the precautionary principle is basically better safe than sorry. Hold off on new developments, until you know for sure they're not going to cause harm. And this was the principle of Australian Indigenous society, which allowed them to be fairly constant and stable for 60,000 years, and they developed many things of great beauty in this stable society, and developed their consciousness in dimensions that are not that common in our modern world. It's been a principle in Chinese history, certainly. I mean, if you look in the 12th, 13th century, China had quite advanced technology, all sorts of machinery and so forth. And then they sent sailing ships all over the world. And then they decided to stop that because it was being disruptive and they didn't know where it was going to lead. Right now, modern Western society has generally not proceeded on this sort of basis, which is really why we've developed computers and AI and the internet and modern medicine and gone to the moon and all this stuff, right? We have implicitly and with a lot of argumentation along the way, we've largely followed what Max called the proactionary principle, which basically means, have a bias toward doing stuff and not making prohibitions, and a bias toward letting processes unfold in a natural way without trying to blockade them. It doesn't mean there's nothing that you should ever prohibit and try to stop. I mean, I'm not advocating selling briefcase nuclear weapons in Walmart, right? But it means that when there's complex technologies, complex situations with, richly nuanced and balanced pluses and minuses, and it's hard to understand the implications for good or for bad. In a situation like that, the proactionary principle would argue just do it, and keep an eye out, watch to be sure you're not doing anything extraordinarily dangerous, but don't be paranoid, don't be a wimp, and look at the cost of not doing something along with the costs of doing that thing. And so justifying proaction versus precaution on a sort of historical, societal, and philosophical level is very interesting and important. Would be a long and deep conversation, which gets into epistemology and metaphysics and all sorts of things. But I wanted to mention that because in general, that's where I'm coming from. And I think that attitude is why we have advanced technology. That's why we have modern dentistry and vaccines and computers and so forth. I mean, this is why we have developed weird new technologies, which in every case we didn't know what would be the good or bad aspects and how they would be balanced, right? So I do think there are cases where you don't want to be proactive, no matter how gonzo for the future you are. I mean, briefcase nukes is one. Gain of function research on viruses that can infect humans is certainly an interesting borderline case, which society chose to proceed with anyway, in spite of some pretty obvious risks to do with the leakage from labs and so forth. But the thing is, with these technologies, nuclear weapons have very few uses besides blowing people and their possessions up. I mean, you can use them to blast starships, as Freeman Dyson suggested, but by and large, they're considered a weapons technology. And taking animal viruses and uplifting them so they can kill humans better. Again, there's not a lot of immediate humanitarian uses for that. I mean, the purpose is to better understand them in case they develop later in nature or something. But I mean, AI is different than that, right? There's tremendous obvious positive benefit of these technologies, and so then balancing the cost of not building the tech against the cost of doing it is complex. But what this also means is that if you try a prohibition, many actors who are not particularly bad actors are going to wangle their way around the prohibition anyway. I mean, the only reason to wangle around a prohibition on briefcase nukes is pretty much if you want to blow people up, or you're a really ethics-free, conniving business person who wants to make a living selling briefcase nukes to other jerks who do want to blow people up, right? But reasons to keep developing AI are just extremely numerous beyond wanting to do anything bad. So I think there are two things that are sort of mixed up here, and they're mixed up in a very natural way. So one thing is, I think this sort of prohibition is ethically very dubious, because balancing the good and the bad of this sort of technology is very hard. The other thing is, this sort of prohibition will never work and is completely impossible in practice. And I think these are tied together, because when the good and bad are all tangled up and complex and hard to assess, this kind of prohibition is going to be way hard to put into place, because so many parties won't go along with it anyway, right? And you can see both the aspects with this proposed 6-month pause. I mean, I think ChatGPT, LLMs, and so forth are not general intelligences. they're not going to be sort of incrementally morphable into general intelligences just by tweaking the architecture a little bit. I do think they could serve as components of general intelligences, and whether the LLM component is 60% or 20% of the final general intelligence, I'm more toward the 20% side, but I think there's still a very interesting ingredient in AGI systems that are going to be built, but they're not AGIs yet. They're software systems. They're very interesting software systems. I'm engaged with a few people building amazing commercial applications on top of LLMs. I'm also engaged with some research trying to couple LLMs with logical reasoning systems to make them make more sense and carry out multi-step reasoning better. So that can they be used for unpleasant things? Of course they can be used for unpleasant things. I mean, they can generate a lot of nonsense, so people can be tricked to believe it's not nonsense. But I mean, if we're going to ban things that people can use to fool people and spread bullshit, we're going to ban the whole internet and mobile phones very, very rapidly. And these also have complex pluses and minuses that we don't know how to balance. So I just think there's clear potential for tremendous good from these. There's potential that they serve an ingredient of AGIs that can do even more good. There's also ways people can do harm with them. I see this as not different than so many other technologies out there. And the practicality of a pause is a whole other thing, because if such a pause were really adopted on paper, which is obviously not going to happen anyway. So I think signing the petition is mostly virtue signaling rather than anyone thinking the pause was really going to happen. But I mean, if such a pause really did happen, I mean, what would happen? First of all, Putin and Xi Jinping aren't going to do that pause. Even if they said they were, they're not going to. China can't even obey the World Trade Organization's sort of basic ethics about not stealing other people's IP, right? So on the other hand, big tech companies like a Google and Microsoft and so on, they're not really going to pause either. They're just going to develop AI internally and use it inside their products in a quieter way rather than making it available to the consumer. So if such a pause were adopted, which it won't be, that would result in a combination of nasty dictators gaining in AI over the democratic world, and it would result in greater centralization of AI within the developed world as big tech companies take their LLM projects black and don't open them up to the consumer. So I think almost everyone could see this, and they just wanted to sign it so they could look like they're ethical and concerned, right? Because that's a good look to have.
We have a lot of questions from the people following the live, and I want to tackle some of them, and they are touching these topics. But let's start with a different question from Rohit. What is the picture behind the wall, on the wall behind you, Ben?
Oh, what? Oh, that orange picture. I think that's
Yes.
that is the album cover of "Axis Old as Love" by Jimi Hendrix. So go
All right.
listen to "Axis Bold as Love," one of the great albums in music history.
All right, Rohit. So you can check it out. And David is asking, why is the mainstream pushing the AI is going to kill us all narrative? And then he proposes a benign answer, saying maybe to create a common alien enemy to unite us and end the wars between nations. So to answer David in part, AI deserves a lot of conversations, and I hope more would happen, especially illustrating the benefits of AI, like Ben said, in a pro-actionary attitude. And the mainstream media is driven by fear, is driven by the worst possible narrative that attracts attention. So it is natural that they would push that. On the other hand, it is definitely the case that there are approaches that we have taken to iteratively develop solutions. For example, the SpaceX rockets that are now landing regularly belonged to science fiction, and NASA or the Russians or the Chinese or the Europeans would have never developed them if crazy Elon Musk didn't come around and said, I don't care that everyone says it's impossible. I will just blow them up until we don't succeed. So that is where the alignment issue comes up, because there are people who believe that not current AGI, but future AGI can um, become agentic. It can design and then execute goals of its own, and it can slowly diverge, and then the side effects of whatever it does can have very big effects on us, and both the speed of its divergence and the size of these effects can be such to represent an existential threat to human civilization, without us being able to say after the fact, oh, sorry, we destroyed the current one. Let's bring a new human civilization in its place and iteratively find what works. So, again, two questions. Do you believe this framing of the alignment problem is worth considering now, given that by your own assessment, the singularity may be as close as 5 years from now?
Mhm.
And the second question is, if we don't have a current solution to the alignment problem, what are the paths that we need to take in order to find those solutions so that we have them when we need them?
Good questions. Yeah, I want to. I forgot to say one thing about the pause, which I want to address briefly. Then I'll go to this more bigger and deeper, more interesting question. I think another strange thing about the pause petition is it focused on training larger and larger language models. And so one thing that was ironic when I saw that is, well, actually, if people really stopped training larger language models and started working on more productive approaches to AGI, then that might actually have the opposite impact of what people signing the petition thought, and might accelerate the path toward AGI. And Sam Altman actually made the same point in recent remarks at MIT. He's like, well, this lacks technical nuance, because what we're doing at OpenAI now is not so much just obsessing on bigger models anyway. I mean, they're integrating GPT-4 with Microsoft Knowledge Graph. They're working on a lot of other things besides just bigger and bigger models. So this is the difficulty of prohibitions on complex things. Like you can just say no language model with more than 1 trillion parameters. Well, then what if someone makes a complex valued parameter, which equals 2 real valued parameters, right? I mean, what if you have 5 different models with 500 billion parameters living in different places that cooperate with each other? I mean, these things are too slippery. The same reason that software patents are much harder than biotech or nuclear energy patents or something, right? They're slippery in their definition, as well as slippery in balancing good and bad aspects in the short term. And I think, yeah, going to the alignment question now, I don't really like the word alignment that's used in discussing the future coordination of AI minds and human minds. I mean, I understand what people are getting at when they talk about AI alignment. I don't want to nitpick on word choice in too much of a ridiculous way, but to me, there's nothing to align with, because human morals, human ethics, human ideals, human ideas are intercontradictory and kind of scattered all over the place, and are also rapidly evolving, right? So I mean, if you look in at indigenous Australians, at Asians, at the average Ugandan subsistence farmer, at you know Islamic people in rural Saudi Arabia, and then look at people in the tech hubs of the U.S. today. Right now, there's tremendously different views on so many things, and if you roll back 50, 100 years, there were divergent views among these different groups, but also each of those groups has a different view than they have now, right? Like, I mean, when I was growing up in New Jersey in the 1970s and part of my childhood, I mean, you would get the crap beaten out of you for being publicly gay or even being suspected of it. Now, that's not true in New Jersey anymore, but you can get killed for being gay in many parts of sub-Saharan Africa, right? So there's not a coherent thing to align with at any level of precision. And the way humanity thinks about what's good and right 50 years from now, post-singularity, is going to bear only a loose resemblance to how we feel now. I mean, I think some things that we take very much for granted now are like a focus on our biological family, right? I mean, that's a big thing for me. I have 5 children and a granddaughter. I live near my mother, who's almost 80. That's a big thing. If we're post-singularity people, aging and death is gone. Reproduction doesn't have to happen in the traditional biological way, although it may still sometimes. I mean, the whole role that family has in psychology may be quite different 50 years from now than now. And this may sound very disturbing to some people now. I mean, just as gay people were very disturbing to the people I knew in New Jersey in the 70s, right? So I mean, things evolve. So then we're not saying take the worldview of San Francisco Silicon Valley tech bros in 2023 and make future AGIs always align with the worldview of 2023 Silicon Valley tech bros, right? Like that's not what we want any more than we want to forever be aligned with the elite in Rome in 1521 or something, right? So what you want is somehow for the chaotic, self-contradictory, evolving system of human values to be coordinated and co-evolving somehow with the evolving set of AI and transhuman and synthetic organism values. And that's an interesting thing to think about. It doesn't seem like the kind of thing that can be guaranteed in any way, nor the kind of thing that you can prefigure and design in a detailed way. We're talking about the coupling of two subsystems of a complex self-organizing system, which by its nature is going to be evolving in ways we cannot now understand. So, I mean, you have people talking about, we want an AI that will provably never deviate from its initial goals. I'm like, shit, what if the Pope had created an AI in 1400 that would provably never deviate from the goals the Pope gave it, and it was super powerful, and we'd all be forced to be Catholics at risk of being blown up by AI drones coming out of the Vatican or something, right? I mean, that would be a tremendously horrible thing to do to a superhuman mind if you could somehow wire its brain to never deviate from the goals of 2023 Silicon Valley tech bros. Fortunately, there's no way to really do that anyway.
So I cherish our diversity, and we have the ability to aggregate, and we have built societies that either accept, develop, or impose a certain set of consistent views and behaviors. And today, as a human civilization, we brought this at, roughly speaking, continental level, right? There are different kinds of expectations of behavior from humans within societies and across societies as well. But we more or less subscribe to certain sets of behaviors and expectations around those behaviors. So the opportunity, I think, is huge for SingularityNET to find a way for the decentralized AI and AGI systems to navigate the complex sets of behaviors across a parameter space that is vastly larger than not what humanity has been able to explore today, to find consistent and coherent niches that can build desirable futures, both for them as well as for ourselves, current and future humans, under an admittedly broader definition of what it means to be human and what it means to be living a dignified life than not what medieval expectations would support. So Ashley is actually asking, how far is SingularityNet from AGI, considering that OpenCog is very robust but not there yet?
Well, so from a SingularityNET NewNet hypercycle view, the technology is somewhat agnostic to what approach you take to building toward AGI on top of it. And we have a project called Zarqua, ZIRQA, which we're spinning out now, which is pretty much building LLMs to run decentralized on SingularityNet NewNet hypercycle platform, right? And we will enhance those LLMs with OpenCog or whatever other interesting tools come up certainly. But I mean, you can do LLMs, you could do other sorts of neural nets, you could build totally different sort of AI system. You could build Pei Wang's non-axiomatic reasoning system, right? You could do anything that can be implemented in modern software languages, and we can decentralize it. And that I think it's important both as a modular software design and in terms of building a community. I want to attract people developing weird new AI ideas onto the platform. Now that said, my own AGI research effort is still oriented on the new version of OpenCog, which is called Hyperon, and I think in the next 1 to 2 years we're going to get to a massively scalable version of OpenCog Hyperon, and I mean we're making quite good progress. I mean we have a distributed version of OpenCog's metagraph space, the Atom space, which is built on top of MongoDB and Couchbase, and we're working on a massively accelerated compiler and execution engine for OpenCog Hyperon's AGI programming language Meta, which basically works by compiling OpenCog meta code into Roland code that runs on the Roland interpreter that was developed in the R-chain blockchain. So we've got a bunch of interesting stuff going on the infrastructure side. There's a collaboration with Simuli, Rachel St. Clair's company out of Florida, on building an optimized chip for OpenCog pattern matching, and then an AGI board as well. So I think we have a lot of different thrusts going on to make massively scalable infrastructure for OpenCog Hyperon, as well as ongoing R&D on the mathematical foundations of how to get large language models and other deep neural nets, logical reasoning, and then evolutionary learning to work together. And I think this is key because LLMs and other generative neural networks are great at recognizing and synthesizing patterns. Logical reasoning engines are better at telling truth from falsehood and carrying out multi-chain logical inferences. Evolutionary learning, simulating natural selection in the computer, is good at creativity, which is how evolution created us. So I think getting these three AI paradigms working together in this distributed network is going to be big. And I think that if we didn't exist in OpenCog, the mainstream of big tech AI would get to a similar place eventually. You can already see they're taking LLMs and they're glomming Microsoft Knowledge Graph onto it, and Google, they're glomming Google's Knowledge Graph onto it. Why? Because they want to ground it in reality. And eventually they'll want to, solving the hallucination and bullshit problem is high on the list, and integrating with knowledge graphs that can do reasoning is an obvious route there. Their knowledge graphs are not as advanced as the one we have in OpenCog. But then once the bullshitting problem is solved, then there's the banality problem of just, yes, it's amazing ChatGPT can write poetry, but on the other hand, it's all really bad poetry, right? So then how do you get it to be creative and inspired like people are? And I think then you're going to inevitably move towards some sort of evolutionary algorithm approach. So I think big tech will get there to the ingredients that we have already in the OpenCog design. But if we can get there faster by deploying OpenCog Hyperon at scale on a decentralized infrastructure, I mean, then we're doing a couple different things, right? One is, we're accelerating past where big tech will get, because they're fixated on the particular techniques that will best leverage their advantage in data, rather than on techniques that are not as data training data set bound. But the other thing we're doing is we're making it so that, hey, lo and behold, the next big breakthrough, the breakthrough to AGI, happened in the decentralized ecosystem rather than the centralized ecosystem. Right now, if you're Nick Bostrom or Eliezer Yudkowsky, that's going to seem far worse than having it happen within a centralized company, because from the mindset that some of these AI ethics boffins have, right? They would rather have a small group of people controlling the AGI, so then the small group of people could be convinced to shut it down. Whereas if you have an AGI rolled out in a decentralized way, where it's running on millions of different machines in every country on the planet, then nobody can turn it off in such a simple way. Now, it's not to say humanity couldn't shut it off if humanity as a whole wanted to. I mean, that's like, think about Bitcoin or Ethereum. I mean, how would you shut down those networks? It's not easy for a government to shut down those networks. If Bitcoin or Ethereum were going to kill everyone, well, yeah, people could just start running their nodes, right? I mean, so, and if you have a majority of people who will refuse to confirm transactions, it won't get confirmed, right? So being decentralized in a blockchain-based mechanism doesn't mean like this will run amok, and if all humans wanted to stop it, they couldn't stop it. I mean, eventually things could get there, but that's not implied in the use of a decentralized fabric. But it does mean that it's hard to shut down in the same way that Bitcoin or BitTorrent or something are hard to shut down. As long as there's a substantial group of people with a bunch of hardware who want to keep the thing going, then it will keep going. And personally, I see risks either way. Like having a centralized entity could be the best if the people running that centralized entity are open-minded, open-hearted, compassionate, noble individuals who don't fall prey to the pathologies that have befallen almost every group of humans in an elite power position in human history. But it's possible it could go well. The decentralized approach has the downside that nasty groups of people could try to take over the network. They can fork the open source code. They can try to do their own unpleasant thing, right? So we are placing a bet on the vast, chaotic team of unwashed masses of humanity over self-appointed elites with huge amounts of money and close military intelligence connections, right? So neither one is an incredibly safe and certain path forward. my view is that a fundamentally compassionate and human benefit oriented AGI is a bit more likely to emerge from the decentralized approach. I don't think this is the thing you can have a completely solid like mathematical proof of, right? Because we're not just talking about the algorithms and structures. We're talking about how the human systems interact with the compute fabric and the AI algorithms. But I think there's lots of reasons to be optimistic. I mean, I think, with the advanced technology we have right now, you could have so much more destruction in the world than what we have. But in fact, there's remarkably few groups of highly competent, technically trained individuals out there who are massing together to put their energy toward killing a lot of people or causing mass destruction. Like you don't have a situation like the amount of people behind, say, a strong tech startup, say Anthropic or Stable Diffusion, not to harp on my own company. So the amount of money and energy behind a startup tech company and the brilliant people going into it and the money going into that hardware, you don't have initiatives like that focused on blowing up a lot of people or wreaking great mayhem in the world, right? You could theoretically, right? But in fact, the massive technical innovation, it's going toward making people money. Some bits of it are going toward doing good for people. Some things may go awry, but what we see is, on the whole, most humans who are banding together in groups to advance technology are actually not trying to do horrible, nasty shit with it, right? And I think that's going to continue. It's going to continue as we move toward AGI in an open and decentralized manner.
There are a lot of people following the stream, asking questions, evidently very passionate about these topics.
Let's try to do a few quick questions, and yeah, I can
Well,
try to give some short answers if you want to throw
one of them is quite general, but I think important. If they want to get involved with the project, what kind of talent, what kind of skills, both in the core as well as in the ecosystem projects, are most valuable in order to further the missions of SingularityNET and of the single ecosystem projects as well?
There's a great variety of skills that are useful for advancing SingularityNet ecosystem projects and other projects out there, which are advancing, singularity oriented technology in beneficial ways. So I mean, I wouldn't want to be rigid about it. I mean, because we're working with lawyers, we're working with social media people, we're working with all people from all different walks of life, as well as the more obvious things like AI developers, software engineers, blockchain developers, biologists, cognitive scientists, and whatnot. But as a generalization, I would say people who can spend. So I mean, if you have the mentality and interest to be a core AGI developer, that's great. We can always use more people who know shitloads of math, computer science, engineering, and so forth, right? If that's not your thing, I would say there's always a need for people who have a mastery of some other domain area and a decent knowledge of AI, because when you're trying to apply AI in, say, biology or supply chain or media or whatever it is, it still comes down to some small group of humans who understand that domain and have a decent sense of the AI to make that bridge. Like, AI is not yet figuring out how to apply itself in one after another vertical area. So I think we're entering an era where cross-disciplinarity is going to be key and highly valued.
The day after tomorrow, there will be the Decentralized Governance Summit. What can people expect to find there? What are the the kind of contributions that you will also provide, as well as the other speakers?
Yeah, good question. So, making a decentralized AI network has a number of aspects, and I've tended to focus on the technical aspects, just of how do you get large scale compute processes of the sort you need in AI to actually run across a huge number of machines without a central controller, because there's a huge load of hard technical problems you have to solve to make this happen, which we're working on in SingularityNET, NewNet, Hypercycle, OpenCog, True AGI, Zarka, blah blah blah. But I mean the other aspect to making AI fundamentally decentralized is governance of this decentralized network, right? Because it's not all about the computing yet. All these compute nodes in your decentralized network are run by people. They have to decide to run this software on their machine. They have to decide when to upgrade to a new version of software. There will be decisions about the parameters of the software in the network that have to be made for now by the people who are running the software nodes and the people who are using the software running on the nodes, right? So there's a significant governance aspect to decentralized AI networks as well. When we founded SingularityNet in 2017, one of our goals was to gradually transform the governance of the whole SingularityNet network into a DAO of some form, a decentralized autonomous organization. Not meaning initially it would just be the AI nodes making the decisions, but meaning that it would be a democratically governed network of humans and AIs, with the whole collective of participants in the network playing a meaningful role in the ongoing decisions of evolving the network over time. So we've had some measure of that so far. I mean, we've had some pretty big decisions in the history of SingularityNet made by community vote and community discussion, but we haven't gone as far in that direction as I would like to have. And so basically the governance powwow, the summit that we're having on Friday, is oriented toward pulling together, various people involved in different aspects of SingularityNet ecosystem and gathering energy toward, in the next 2 years, how can we transform SingularityNet into a radically more decentralized organization where the breadth of participants in the network are playing a greater role in making the important decisions about the evolution of what happens in the network. And I mean, I picked the timing of 2 years in my head with a couple things in mind. One is I don't want to rush things to an insane degree because we're doing very valuable stuff, and I don't want to disrupt it in some stupid way. And there are many pathologies that we've seen in the blockchain world from DAO governance. On the other hand, if we could get to human level AGI in 3 years, then I want to have fundamentally and fully decentralized governance before that, because I think it's going to be key in the transition from narrow AI to AGI in all sorts of ways we can't prefigure now, right? Like I'm a big optimist about what happens after this singularity, more based on my heart and soul and feeling than based on rational analysis, because I think based on rational analysis, the confidence interval is just very wide and there's a lot that we can't rationally know. But I have a strong faith that things are going to come out pretty amazingly once we have superhuman AGI that we've raised up in a compassionate and democratic way. But I can see a lot of risk of chaos unfolding en route to this utopic future. And I think that having the network in which AGI emerges fully decentralized and very richly democratically governed, that gives a lot of important degrees of freedom for how the emerging AI network sort of deals with any chaos that happens between here and the singularity. So I think it's both the direction we committed to when we founded SingularityNet, and potentially could be really, really important to humanity if the breakthrough to AGI happens within the SingularityNET network, which is obviously what we're pushing for.
I know that you are also going to be at a couple of events that you wanted to mention. Um, the
Yeah, that's
consensus
right.
in
Thanks for
Austin,
remembering it. So
and Mhm.
yeah, events are coming back, right? So spending a couple years sitting at home
Yes,
working on
and
AI
the
and blockchain.
other was Web Summit. Go ahead.
Yeah. I think events have come back, right? During the pandemic, I was mostly sitting home working on AI and blockchain and playing with my kids. And now conferences are back. I'm trying to keep it under control so I can keep getting work done. But I'm going to a consensus event in Austin next week. I'll be doing a conversation or interview with Edward Snowden on AI and security, where we'll hit on a bunch of these same points. Also doing a concert at the Speakeasy Club where I'm playing keyboards with the Jam Galaxy band with our robot lead vocalist Desdemona, the Sophia robot's little sister. There'll be a bunch of SingularityNet people around the consensus, so definitely come and hang out with us. And following that, I'll be at Web Summit Rio and also doing an AI meetup in Rio on one of the evenings of Web Summit. And I was born in Brazil way back in 1966, so I'm the world's worst Brazilian citizen because my Portuguese is horrible. But I'm a dual citizen, U.S. and Brazil. It always feels good to go back to the motherland. So there's if you're going to be in Austin or Rio, then there's a bunch of Singularity people around in the next few weeks. But of course, the core work we're doing is distributed around the globe, and you can get involved on the interwebs. If you go to SingularityNet.io, you can join mailing list and find various GitHub repos and Telegram, LinkedIn, and everything else. So we encourage people to get involved. These will be the next few years, maybe the last few years that you have a chance to help bring about a beneficial singularity, unless you're doing it in some post-singularity video game or something.
Ben, this was wonderful. Thank you very much for covering so many of the topics. And yeah, I'm sure that there will be a lot more to talk about. And congratulations for everything that you have been able to accomplish with SingularityNet, everyone in the teams. And good luck with further developing all the projects. And I will see you at the decentralization summit just in a couple of days. We will both be speaking there to talk about governance and how to ride the tiger really in the next period of time. Thank you again.
Thanks a lot, David. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone, for being here with us today at Beyond Conversations. I am sure that there will be a lot more opportunities to ask questions and to really find out how technology is impacting and benefiting society around us. Goodbye.